Are you shining on 87.7 FM? You're listening to Z. So please wake up, dress up, show up on time, and listen in. That's what with messages to all of you right this minute. So let's come together and do some good during these last 10 days of Ramadan. Some of the people that you know have gone for itikaf, and it's very, very good time now to start praying, making du'as. And today we have joining us Brother Osama. He's looking very good. He was in Cairo last week, and he's traveling around the globe and keeping us updated about where he is at present. Osama, assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. How is it?
Well, I see you had a little bit of a sore throat from your trip to Cairo, Osama. Are you taking some cough medicine?
No. It's just late nights, and you know what Cairo is like. To get your voice heard anywhere, with all the noise and all the bustle, you just have to shout.
Well, there's too much hustle and bustle and background noise where you are right now. We need you to be...
It's probably the wind, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a wind. So you need to come away from an area where there's no wind, so we can have a good transmission for our listeners out there who are currently starting to wonder if you are underwater.
All right.
You sound like you are underwater in a submarine.
Do I? Okay.
Yes.
No, well, I wish I was. No, I'm just in a... I don't think even this tree is... Actually, no, it is natural.
No, so,
maybe
Osama,
an artificial.
while you're going somewhere where there's no wind, we can talk to our listeners. So please, if you could do that, then we'll have better reception and I'll be able to hear you better. So Osama is now gone to another location. So you are listening to Z on the Rise and Shine on Ramadan 87.7 FM. Today is Saturday and we are in the midst of the last 10 days of Ramadan. So if you're listening in right now, send me a WhatsApp and I'm going to give you a little gift. We have quite a few things. Have we got any vouchers left? My studio manager will tell me now, the producer. In fact, yesterday was an interesting program in the evening. We had our studio team come into the studio and they were explaining, answering questions, what goes on here during the 30 days of Ramadan. So that was a first for them. They were very happy that finally they have received some acknowledgement from a presenter. So that was what they were excited about during iftar time and making a big fuss about it. Brother Osama, are you back with us?
I am back with you, yeah.
That is much better, Osama. The wonders of technology, Osama. To be underwater and to be in a wind environment does not suit the FM transmission at all.
So the technology is not very good, huh?
No, it is very good if you're totally digital, but the Ofcom RSL works on FM. So in the future, it will run on to other technologies like the DAB, digital, and so on. So things are moving along. So, Osama, we've had a very busy week with EDI. Are you familiar with EDI in your career?
Well, it's all the acronyms that you tend to come up with. These fancy letters. Equality, integration, and diversity, isn't it?
No. It's quite surprising, you know. I'm asking 10 people if they know what is EDI, and 9 of them don't know. It's equality.
I know what EID is.
It's Eid.
But I don't know what EDI.
That's interesting, you know, because EDI and Eid are connected, aren't they?
Well, they are. So the same 3 letters.
Yeah. So when I tell people Eid... In fact, one person, when I mentioned EDI to him, he thought I was saying that when is ED, you know, ED.
EDI, I thought, is just spelling of Eid. No, you just couldn't spell Eid and you came up with EDI.
No, EDI is equality, diversity, inclusion. Now,
inclusion. So it's not integration.
Now, what we're trying to do here, we are going to try and bring the D back into the diversity. At the moment, the D is a small d, and we need to make it a capital D. And certainly the inclusion is also related to the integration. So we have cohesion, we have the A to Z of diversities from different countries. People are here from Argentina, from Armenia, from Afghanistan, and right the way to Z to Zimbabwe and Zambia, right? Every letter denotes a diversity, a country that people are here from in the city of Leicester. So that is one example. But if you go to Manchester, you go to Liverpool, you go to Leeds, you go to Birmingham, and you go to London. So you'll find the same situation in these cities. So diversity is key in every major city, especially in the inner city. The outer city is not the case, but the inner city is where all the diverse community will always tend to arrive at. Now, of course, what do you call these people? Like myself, I came here 50 years ago as a Ugandan refugee, right? And of course, even at the age of 10, I knew how to spell the word refugee because I came from an already diverse country called Uganda, where at the age of 10, you were speaking 5 languages. How's that, Brother Osama? How many languages did you speak when you were 10 years old?
1.5. I mean, I didn't think I mean, I spoke English, but not to the level I speak it now. So, yeah, 1.5.
1.5. So you spoke Arabic and you spoke half English.
Yeah, pidgin English as it was then.
Yeah, pidgin English. So that is quite the norm with many refugees who arrive, they can only speak their own mother tongue and they struggle. So back 50 years ago, that was the case, and we had acceptance. We had tolerance, but 50 years later, we have cohesion. The question to all of you listening in right now is, do we have integration? Do we have integration, Brother Osama?
No, No, it seems to be ghettoized society. It's becoming more and more ghettoized. Integration. I mean, it depends what you call integration is. The term tolerance, I think, is just such a negative term to use in terms of tolerance. It's as if somebody's existence is an offense, but nevertheless, the other party gracefully accepts you or tolerates you for just being who you are. I mean, the idea that it's a tolerant society is not such a thing to be proud of. An accepting society, perhaps, is a much better word to use. But tolerance is, I say, it's somebody who is offending against you, and you're tolerating it. So it's like an act of magnanimity, or you should be grateful for the fact that they are tolerating it. So I think it's actually a negative word. And maybe we should revisit the idea that we have a tolerant society. Maybe we should now develop to a stage where we have a much more accepting society, accepting of differences, accepting of the fact that each individual has their own unique traits, their own unique ideas, and accept them for what they are. You don't particularly like them, you don't have to abide by them or even accept them in terms of, you don't have to live your life by them, but at least accept that somebody may have a different viewpoint.
Of course, now in the UK and many other European countries, I think the problems are relatively the same with the diversity factor, and the norms of employment have changed, where employment of past, the management, the senior management, the governance, the boardroom was biased. Now we have diversity in the boardroom, but one of the listeners has said to me that I would rather have the right man to do the job than to have, for the sake of it, a diverse person who is of color to sit there representing me, and he's not acting for me as somebody else who could be any denomination, any color, and he's doing the job rightfully.
Well, I mean, you say it's diverse. Actually, in a way, yeah, diverse probably because it's they superficially or outwardly look different, but essentially, in terms of ideas, in terms of values, they're not diverse. They're all cut from the same cloth.
Cut
They're
from the same
motivated by
cloth.
they're motivated by the same thing. They're driven by the same thing. So you, on the one hand, yeah, it's great. I'll see different people of different complexions and different sexes and different religions, but essentially, you strip all that away. You strip the external away. You've got exactly the same thing. They speak the same language. They aspire to the same ideas, and they have the same values. That to me is not diversity. That to me is what you call concealed homogeneity.
That is a heavy word now. Keep it simple because it is Saturday morning and I can feel some of them people are waking up and they're rubbing their eyes and you've dropped a huge word there on them. Please, Osama.
Well, I'm sorry for the use of the English language.
It is it's a bit heavy. Could you use another word, please?
Well, I mean, they're all the same. They're effectively matches in a matchbox.
Okay, now I'm going to explain that.
I think I'll tell you what and you only realize it when you leave England. Essentially, if you don't think the same, you're marginalized and you're ghettoized, and the system doesn't accept you. Even you may be of the same ethnic group, but there's an intolerance of accepting different ideas. You're ridiculed, you're mocked, you're marginalized, you're made out to be as some sort of a insane person, right? Whereas in other countries, different ideas are welcomed. They are welcomed. And you realize that liberty is not simply about, the bells and whistles. You pretend it's a free society, go and put a tick in a box once every 5 years, and that's it. You've done your bit, and hey, we are all free.
Now, I'll take you back, Brother Osama. I want to take you back to, say, in the business world, right? A different idea that is going to create more revenue is welcomed and it's immediately taken up because revenue is key in your business. But in our civil life...
But should it be? I mean, that's the whole point. Somebody should once in a while step back and say, is really the revenue the be-all and end-all of what drives even a business? I mean, put it this way: if the Cadburys or the Quakers were only driven by revenue, do you think they would have come up with Cadbury Village? That is clearly not a revenue-driven mentality.
Of course, that is also part of the marketing and branding policy to bring people in.
I don't think it was a branding and marketing policy. It was actually a genuine belief that if you treat your workers with a bit of dignity and a bit of humanity, it actually makes them more productive and more able to actually work for that particular enterprise. It's a win-win. I mean, treating somebody with dignity is not such a alien concept. I mean, look, Safa lived, my brother, sorry. I assume people know who he is. My brother, he lives in a house, which is effectively was built by the owner of a mill in South Leeds, Gilroyd Mills. All the houses around it were all built for the workers. Now, I just cannot understand as to how it is that in the Victorian days, there was that sort of social consciousness, even amongst the most capitalists of all, the most liberal of all people, neoliberal, and it's a race to the bottom. And by the way, it's not actually making even those rich people any richer. All it's doing is actually eventually lead into their own demise. Because when you have people who can not afford to buy the things that you are churning out, because there's a desperate clamor to monopolize everything, including the access to wealth and currency, sooner or later you end up committing suicide as an enterprise.
So that we are all victims of our own doings. We live in a capitalist world where it is all driven by debt, and we don't want to go into.
It's driven by greed.
Yeah, greed.
It's driven by
debt. Greed. Your greed can create your debt, and so on. Now, if you go here, we are in the UK. If you go to across the seas, you'll come to America, and you'll see the percentage of people there that are in debt, not with one credit card, but with 4 or 5 credit cards, and everybody is like robbing Peter to pay Paul. So to keep your credit score on, you are in a cycle, using one card to pay for another one, and it's a vicious cycle, isn't it?
It's an inhuman cycle. It's a new form of slavery. It's actually economic slavery.
Exactly. So we're talking about economic slavery now. That brings me back to say that we are in the week where we are discussing EDI. We are bringing awareness. We had a program a couple of days ago. It was all culture capital to build in schools, in our schools, because that is where we need to start this journey of EDI in the primary schools and then in the secondary school. And we've identified that if you are saying that you put a person of color in a POP, position of power, then they don't perform to the values, the intentions that they went in to do that task, then you are saying they'll be cut from the same cloth and they won't get the job done, right?
Well, I think that basically, even if the best of intentioned people, once they get into that position, they are forced to act in a certain way. I mean, it's quite an interesting theory that you learn in international relations. Is it the person who takes up the position who then changes that particular post into his own image, or does the post actually shape the man into its own image? And I think it's the other way around. Even the most well-intentioned of people, the best of people, once they are put in that position, then they will act in a different manner.
This is
the prime example of that. The prime example of that was Obama. Obama was the archetypal example of how a position, I mean, I don't know. I assume, and you always have to assume, the best of people. I assume he was honest when he was campaigning, and he genuinely believed in everything that he was saying, as opposed to him just being a very good actor. So if he genuinely believed in all of that, then clearly he was straitjacketed to behave in accordance with what was expected to him as holder of that position. Like I say, I could be wrong. He may have been just the charlatan all along. Nobody knows. Only he will know.
As we are speaking, a message has come in that an example would be our Home Secretary, Priti Patel, T.Y. at the end, right? She herself was a refugee from Uganda.
Well, she was born in England, but certainly her parents are.
Okay, her parents are from Uganda, correction there. And she would understand the plight of her mother and father.
Well, I don't know. Maybe her mother and father didn't speak to her about their plight. Maybe they just didn't tell her how obscene it would have been having arrived in Britain. The British authorities decided to send them back to Rwanda.
Or at the time, there was a talk of sending us to the Solomon Islands.
Yeah, there was that, actually. And then I think it went for judicial review and it was overturned. saying that the policy was intrinsically racist.
I see. And 50 years later, have we really changed, Brother Osama? Have we changed? Have we said, have we looked in the mirror and said that be the change that we want to see in this world? We're doing what we were proposing to do 50 years ago.
The Priti Patels of this world actually just shows how disconnected the political class is from the average person in Britain. They are disconnected. Because I'll tell you, I would wager that if this policy was put to a vote, it would be voted down by 70% of the public in Britain. One thing you know about the British people is that they do not have a sense of unfairness. They have a revulsion for unfairness. You know, Britain is the home of equity. It was during the reign of Edward I that the first ever concept of equity and natural justice came into existence. That's why you ended up with a Court of Chancery. It's something which is alien to continental systems. But it was the British who actually who coined that term. And again, it's a rarity. It's only amongst common law jurisdictions that you have something called equity. That you act outside the parameters of the law, the straight-jacketed laws that you have put to seek what is naturally just. And I'm surprised that it is the common law jurisdictions that are setting a very dangerous precedent in this. Leave everything aside. Is it a breach of international law? Yes. So how can you scream at other countries saying they are in violation of international law when you have your own country just throwing its own international treaty obligations out of the window?
Of course, other countries will follow suit because they feel that we have the license now to go ahead and commit these kind of atrocities. And I kind of think that Big Boris, for reference, Boris is Johnson. He's Prime Minister, Osama. As you are sitting far away, you may not be aware. He's the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. And he made a comment saying that, well, we have now a policy to sort out these businessmen. Now, these people who are traffickers, are they called businessmen? Is that right description for them, Osama?
No, of course not. No, of course not. Because essentially they're not. They're in the same category as merchants of death and misery. I mean, they are merchants of misery. They profit out of the misery and desperation of people. But you have to then go and try and deal with the underlying cause of that. What is the underlying cause of all of those people actually risking their own lives to come to Britain? It's not an easy journey. This is not an easy journey to make, right? So they don't want to deal with the causes of that misery. They'd rather deal with not even the outward symptoms. It's just scratching the surface of those symptoms.
So those out there who are called businessmen, who are exploiting human beings and sending them over the waters, then these people are now classed as illegal refugees, and they're then sent back by the government. So what word would you use for the government?
The government?
Yeah.
It's a government in denial. It's a government out of touch of the sentiments of the vast majority of its citizens. They live in their own bubble created by a fake media narrative to make it seem as if that the average British person is so detached from what is fair in this world. And that is I mean, if there is any particular political class that is so detached from its own constituency that it purports to represent, and whose aspirations that it purports to be trying to enact, I think it is governments in Western Europe and North America, completely detached. The reason why they've become detached is because they have generally manufactured media which is monopolized into very few people's hands with their own vested interests to bring about a narrative which even the population doesn't believe. And I'll give you an example, my own personal example, which I would say if this policy was put to a referendum, it would get voted down by 70%, is a case which I did back in 2009 in Isleworth Crown Court, a conspiracy to facilitate illegal entry into the United Kingdom.
That was, what year was that?
2009.
I see.
Isleworth Crown Court.
Of course, there are many...
And the result which I got in that, and I'll tell you, I had two colleagues. I wasn't there for the plea hearing. My two colleagues turn up. They get their clients to plead guilty. My client, because I wasn't there at the time, they thought, you know what, let Osama deal with this one. And they were motivated for a sense of duty to me on a financial level. And when they told me what the result, I said, well, if you pleaded guilty, why did you not plead my own client off? They said, oh, no, we thought we'd let you to do it because, you know, it's your own brief. So I go back to chambers, I check the papers, and I say to them, I said, you know what? This is guilty. This is not guilty all the way. Because what defense have you got? I said, well, there is an old concept in English law called duress of circumstance. I said, there are two people who you pleaded them off. The British government, in the guise of the Home Office, so that's one branch of the Home Office, accepted that they were genuine refugees from Iraq. So essentially, when this guy has come into the country illegally, he was fleeing death or personal injury. In law, you're entitled to break the law as a duress of circumstance where your life is in danger. And I didn't directly run that defense, but the judge, again, and that's what I say, there is a disconnect between the sentiments of the judiciary and the British public and the way its representatives behave, is the fact that the judge, even though it was obliquely my defense in that I actually set the circumstances and the facts, I set them out before the jury, and the judge, again, being a fair-minded judge, acting and abiding by the rule of law and abiding by the concept of equity, allowed me to bring out evidence of this particular person's journey, how his father was oppressed after 2003, how his father was then murdered, how his mother and brother had to flee, how he went to the British embassy in Jordan and they to apply to join them desperately because he didn't want to be returned to Iraq. And as time was running out, he had to flee again from Jordan to go to Malaysia. And again, as his entry was running out, that 6-month entry, he had nowhere to go other than potentially a certain death in Iraq. He then resorted, or his mother in desperation resorted to unlawful means to try to save her son from certain death. But then it goes to show you that the idea that a refugee going and facing persecution is going to be allowed legal entry into the UK is fanciful, because they won't even let you through the front door of a British embassy somewhere out in Beirut or in Amman or anywhere for that matter. I mean, what are you supposed to do if you're a Libyan trying to flee persecution? Go to a British embassy? British embassy doesn't even exist in Tripoli. So there's a disconnect between what people in a position to make decisions actually believe and what the reality is on the ground. And I'll tell you something. The person was acquitted. He was acquitted effectively because the judge put a defense, an alternative defense to the jury. And I'll tell you, there were 3 members of the jury there, that panel. They were in tears when I made my closing speech. And I wrapped it up with one simple line. I said, members of the jury, there is only one way you can convict my client. If you genuinely, hand on heart, look at this story of Exodus in that Bible that you took the oath on, and say you would be willing to convict Moses having turned up on the borders of Canaan, crossing the Sinai Desert, and you say, you facilitated illegal entry into Canaan, and you're a criminal. And all those refugees with you are not refugees, but we will deem them to be illegal entrants, and we're going to hold them in detention centers.
That's interesting. I doubt if many of you listening right now would even know that story. And it is quite well depicted, isn't it?
Yeah, and absolutely. And I'll tell you, I had 3 members of the jury. They were in tears. They couldn't hold their tears back.
So this is just one exceptional case where you did the humane act.
It's not an exceptional case. It is not an exceptional case.
Are there many cases like that?
No, it is not an exceptional case to the British public. It is not an exceptional case when you explain something to an average person in Britain, they will sympathize. It is one of the few countries in the world which has an aversion to unfairness.
So empathy is crucial here, isn't it?
It is part and parcel of everything you are brought up to believe in when you are in Britain.
Of course, now I'm going to move on and request all of you brothers and sisters who are listening in right now, Brother Osama, that we must make du'as for all the brothers and sisters who are our brothers in humanity, our sisters in humanity in Yemen. This atrocity, this war, the killings have been ongoing now for a number of years. Yemen is a country of 20 million people approximately, and 230,000 have lost their lives already. And nobody talks about it. Nobody even will say that there's a war crime being committed there, that weapons are being sold, delivered.
We don't need to go as far as Yemen. All you need to do is go back to something that was closer on our doorstep, and that is Yugoslavia. Okay? You don't need to go all the way to Sana'a. Go back and remember what was happening in Sarajevo. Go back to what was happening in a case, again, which I did. And I always say, the problem that we have is systemic racism. It's a systemic issue. It is not an individual issue.
Well, what really hurt me greatly was when newscasters in the world would come out and say, these are white people, middle class in Europe. These are not people coming.
You sound shocked.
These are not people coming from the Middle East or Africa. And there was.
Yeah, but you sound shocked because that newscaster is reflecting a sentiment which is expressed not by individuals in their own homes on an average street in Britain. Those are sentiments that are expressed in boardrooms and in rooms where decisions are being made. There is a disconnect between people who make decisions and the system and the people they purport to be making decisions on their behalf. There is actually a disconnect.
So
that sentiment, which the newscaster was saying, is not a sentiment which is felt by the average person on the street. And it's a sentiment only a very, very minor minority, an elite, that is making the decision. And it's something which I came across actually back in 1999. I'll go again, personal example. I was reading the papers and the evidence in relation to a very tragic case involving a Bosnian orphan. I won't bring names out of respect for everybody. I think people who are involved will know which case I'm referring to. A Bosnian orphan whose entire family was rounded up, put in a cellar, 27 members, including mother, father, cousins, the women and children. A hand grenade was tossed into that cellar. Only 2 survivors out of 27 human beings. At the time, I think she was 9 or 12-month-old baby, and the cousin who ended up being disabled by shrapnel being embedded in her brain. The only reason that particular child survived unscathed is because the body of her mother ended up falling on top of her, shielding her from the shrapnel of that explosion. Taken to an orphanage in Serbian-held Banja Luka. And it's interesting because, me and my children were actually traveling through not too far, back in February, not too far from that village where that massacre took place. And a middle-class, politically connected English family send a letter, a wish list of what they wanted to have as a child to basically adopt. And it was said that they, in those letters and in that evidence that you see, they specifically wanted a blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl. So it was somebody to order. When they were told there's actually 2 girls, cousins, one is disabled, they say, no, we don't want the disabled one. We want the unscathed one, the normal one. So they leave a disabled girl in an orphanage. They bring the blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl. And there is a correspondence to the person who facilitated that transfer from the person who now receives the child and is purporting to be, wishing to be its mother in the future, saying, are you sure this girl is a Muslim? She's blonde hair and blue eyed. Can you please check just to verify? And the response is sent, yeah, she is a Muslim. Yeah, we have checked. So the perception is that Muslims are actually black. Islam is a black man's religion. So if you're a Muslim, you cannot be European. You cannot be a Slav. So essentially, the Bosnians were allowed to be massacred over 3 years by Europe. A Europe at the time that its chief commissioner, Jacques Delors, said he looked forward to be united by a common Christian identity, that there was no room within Europe for people with a black man's religion.
He actually said that?
Yes.
Well, these are really sad happenings, but awareness. I tell all of you listeners that look around you, become aware of your society that you live in, your community that you live in. Now, you may not have...
By the way, I'm not condemning Serbians here.
Yeah.
I am not. If you put yourself in the shoes of a Serb, I can understand the Serbian viewpoint. I'm not saying that the methods that they used were correct, and I'm not condoning their action in any way, but there's 2 sides to one story. We were only told one side. the other side of the story is that there was a nation literally trying to keep itself together and try and keep itself together, irrelevant of the complexion of one's religion or sect, be united by a common language. And it's so unfortunate that people who were ethnically the same, who were linguistically the same, who shared the same culture, who shared the same journey out of the liberation from the oppression of Nazi Germany within a matter of a few years of celebrating a communal event that was, I mean, it's only 8 years, a communal event that was the Winter Olympics. To me, no other Winter Olympics can even come close to the Sarajevo Olympics. It was the last genuine collective celebratory world event that it was. Phenomenal Olympics. It celebrated humanity aside from the political.
What year was that?
1984.
I see. That is quite a long time ago.
Right, and you had a Yugoslav team made from Muslims, Christian Orthodox, and Christian Catholics.
Now that was solidarity, yes?
That was solidarity.
That was unity.
That was unity. That was collectiveness. And you know what? It's a Yugoslavia that was one of the founding members of what you call the Third Way, the non-aligned nations. You know, the founding members with India and Egypt. They were thinking, we represent the unity of man, the solidarity of man, the standing up for the poor. They're saying that, you know what, we are collectively, what unites us is our own humanity, not the fact that we are different in terms of religion or ethnicity or languages. Unites us a sense of collectiveness, right? You had Muslim Egypt, Hindu India, and Christian, or not even, I don't know, maybe atheist Yugoslavia coming together to say there is an alternative in the way we should proceed with international relations. We don't have to necessarily always do it in an aggressive, conflicting manner.
Of course, right. I'm going to have to stop you there now because we've got 2 minutes left for the program. And this week we've had our EDI week, which is a coincidence because Brother Osama has replied back to us to say that EDI, or is it EID? So Eid is going to be upon us very soon. So during this last 10 days, I want you to all make du'as for all our brothers and sisters in humanity all over the world. Let's not forget that, is it the person who shoots a gun, or is it the person who gives the gun to the person who shoots a gun? So this is something to think about. The people who are fueling these wars, adding a lot more misery and treacherous behavior, they are the ones also to put their hand up and to say, I'm guilty, right? When you are selling weapons of mass destruction, and when you are sending masses of millions of dollars to fuel wars in Ukraine or in Yemen or everywhere else in the world, then you are not at all following the simple rules and tenets of humanity. And if you continue to do that, you will not have humanity, you will not have solidarity, and you will not have unity. You're going to destroy all the work that we here in this community are doing to keep all our communities together and working together as a team. Brother Osama, last words before we close for the day in the morning.
Yeah, picking up on your point. You see, I can understand the people who use the weapons as an end consumer. They have a certain aim or a certain, a certain thing that they want to achieve. What I can't understand are the cynical people who try to profit out of that. Which is worse, the person who is doing it for a certain aim, or the person who's simply doing it for profit? I think the person who's doing it for, it's the equivalent of the drug dealer and the junkie. The junkie is hooked on that, is trying to get...
Right, Brother Osama, you got 10 seconds now to say salams to all our listeners.
Okay. Well, I wish everybody a happy Eid, and
Okay, brothers and sisters, assalamu alaikum.